Good morning, Doc. Doc,
Dr. M.
nice of you. It's Sunday morning over there and Sunday evening in India. You're in Pennsylvania and we're sitting over here thanks to the technology that we can talk to each other. And I do a small brief for my viewers and my listeners to introduce you, Doctor. So here I go. So here we have you. Is the screen visible to you, sir?
Yes, I can see it.
So Dr. Stephen Leuschel, I don't know whether the German surname of yours is pronounced correctly, but I'm not lying. I don't know how to pronounce it. So Leuschel is correct?
That's perfect.
I didn't tell a lie. Anyway, thanks you very much for being there for me. And you're on the 56th episode of the series, the Continuous Improvement series. And this podcast has started 2.5 years, 3 years ago, and I got speakers from US, Canada, Jamaica, Europe, India, South Korea, Japan, and Australia. That's the mission that I have taken on to myself to connect the continuous improvement professionals across the world so that I come to learn the various perspectives of what continuous improvement means to each of us, and we share our concepts. We know that it is based on Toyota production system. Toyota has been there, but how we interpret it, how we are going to implement it is all what I'm looking at and sharing with the continuous improvement community across the globe. And this, in a way, is a digital library. So anybody can access it. So you're done your PhD from Indiana University, Pennsylvania, your doctoral work, and the master's from St. Vincent College. I love this. Well, when you say Kaizen, and why I love this is my sensei, Masaki Imai, who wrote the book Gemba Kaizen, and the person with whom more of a father figure. We lost him this year. He passed on, but he remains. And since we are going to talk about Sensei, you can't replace a Sensei. Except my Sensei Masaki Imai did tell me the Sensei of all Sensei is the Gemba. That's what he told us. So I love this, Kaizen, the relentless pursuit of perfection through innovation drives continuous improvement. Thank you very much for this, Doc. This is your band in your LinkedIn, so I've just picked it up from there. You're going to say much about it. We have read about you. I have read about you, and you have been adapting and implementing Toyota production system through the transformation curve. Thank you very much for that, and encouraging us to read and deep insights that you have in this. Why transformation fails? All of us say it fails, but you have made it very clear in a couple of the chapters in the last when you extracted the main essence of it. And all of us know that there is no failure in that. There's no start line or end line for transformation. And then you have the Sensei secret. You're lucky. Envy you, Doc. Envy you. But then we'll hear from you, so we'll learn from you, and we'll share it together. That's the topic today, and we will come to that and the concept of mentoring. And this is the latest book that you have, Transformation Curve to World Class. This is an amazing book. And I've yet to get a copy of it. And I'll be quite cheeky by asking you to give me a signed copy, Dick. Come on, Doc, give me a signed copy. Right.
I can do that. I can do that. I can email it to you or mail it to you. I can do both if you'd like.
You go ahead. I'm going to read page by page. But today, what we're going to do is what you have learned, discovering the process of self-learning. That's what I love about this concept. And I got hooked on to this book, and when you showed the first time documentary, I was present for that, and I was amazed at what you have captured. And that's the reason that I wanted you on the show. I think I was been chasing you for 2.5 years, and somehow we're not able to meet, but we meet today, and we are going to talk about this. And I'm very grateful to you that you have sent me a recorded uh, presentation of this book. Grateful for that. I mean, you have implemented SMED as far as I'm concerned, so that the transference from this slide to the main show, we do it in seconds, right? So thank you very much. So we hear you, Doc. Toyota Sensei, learning from Georgetown's mentoring process. So I'm going to stop sharing and start sharing the video that you have sent me. Thank you very much for that.
Here to talk to you about my book, Sensei Secrets, Mentoring at Toyota.
Is the video seen? Can you see the video, Stephen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So let's start from the beginning.
Here to talk to you about my book, Sensei Secrets, Mentoring at Toyota, Georgetown. I call this presentation Toyota Sensei, learning from the Georgetown mentoring process, and I'll go through what mentoring is and the process that Toyota used to mentor newly hired American leaders. First, a little bit about my background. I went to St. Vincent College, where I met Roger Lewis, who came from Toyota Georgetown. We did consulting at the Center for Operational Excellence, consulting and training. Then I went into healthcare full-time, got my PhD, and now I'm in manufacturing, implementing a version of the Toyota production system. You have to have a mindset for success, understanding that mutual trust and respect is the underlying foundation for everything that I'm about to teach you and everything that's in the Toyota production system from my understanding. You have to understand that problems are opportunities to improve, and you have to embrace problems, and you have to have a long-term focus. This isn't going to happen quickly. First, a small discussion about why Georgetown. This is a photo of Georgetown as they were breaking ground, their new home in Kentucky. Not sure what year this was, probably 1985, around there. To understand TPS and the Toyota Motor Company, we go back to 1918, where Toyota had the automatic loom. Toyota joined Toyota Loom Works in 1932. In 1935, Toyota formed the Toyota Motor Corporation. In 1974, they started Toyota Auto Body California. 1983, New United Motor Manufacturing Incorporated, or NUMI, in Fremont, California, was a joint venture between GM and Toyota. In 1985, Toyota Georgetown was announced, and they started hiring leaders from America to lead this new plant for Toyota. Understanding the diffusion of lean is also appropriate for understanding the Georgetown mentoring process. At Saturn in 1985, it really emulated Toyota more so than any other company, from my understanding. In 1986 is when Georgetown got started. In 1988 is when the word lean was coined. In 1992, Toyota started the Toyota Supplier Support Center to help its suppliers. In 1990s through the 2000s, there was a professionalization of lean, and then lean in healthcare in 2005. I say all that because all roads point back to Georgetown and the importance of Georgetown that Toyota considered. I have a lengthier presentation if you want to view that about Toyota Georgetown and the diffusion of lean within my course. But this is important to understand, so you get a context of why Toyota implemented this process of mentoring with senseis. At NUMI, Toyota learned how to work with an American workforce and sell cars in the American market. At Georgetown, there was a purposely slow ramp-up schedule so that they could focus on people development, and the production line was replicated, again, so that they could focus on people development. This is a drawing of Mr. Fujio Cho, the president of Toyota, and I'll show you where he fits in the organization structure of the Sensei relationship and the mentoring process here in a few slides. Developmental interactions, there are different types of these interactions, including coaching, mentoring, action learning, apprenticeship, and training. The types of mentorship include mentoring and coaching, action learning and mentoring, traditional mentoring, formal mentoring, and informal mentoring. Mentoring functions include both career and psychological functions. Sponsorship, exposure and visibility, challenging assignments, protecting, and coaching are all career functions of the mentoring process. The psychological functions are role modeling, acceptance and confirmation, counseling, and friendship. There are 4 phases of the mentor relationship: initiation, cultivation, separation, and redefinition. Initiation is when the invitation is extended, there's mutual interest, and a task-centered relationship forms. As the pair move on to the cultivation phase, frequent and more meaningful interactions occur. There's a strong professional and personal relationship. Transformative learning occurs. It's a highly productive relationship, and there's mutual growth between the protege and the sensei. Separation happens when the protege no longer wants guidance, when the mentor can no longer support the protege. Job rotation, promotion, change, blocked opportunities may create hostility and ruin the relationship as well. The redefinition phase is where stress diminishes, a new relationship is formed, gratitude increases, and there's a peer status that has been achieved. The structure of the mentoring relationship at Toyota. You can see here, this is the first Toyota Camry that came off the line in Georgetown. You see the number 1 on the license plate, and up top it says quality today, success tomorrow. And that couldn't be truer. The reality that you need to understand before we get into the process of mentoring at Toyota, the newly hired American workforce, they had to learn leadership, had to learn TPS, had to learn the process in all operations, and they had to do it fast. So that's the reality that they lived in. The organizational structure included Mr. Fujio Cho at the top as president, the general manager, managers, and group leaders. So the group leaders report to the managers report to the general managers, and the general managers reported to Mr. Cho. On the other side of the organization chart was the senseis, and Toyota called them senior executive coordinators for the higher senseis in the org chart, executive coordinators for the senseis for the managers, and coordinators for the group leaders. So again, all the coordinators were senseis, and from my understanding, from what the interviews told me, they were the best of the best senseis that Toyota had to offer. So the Toyota mentoring relationship, all proteges and senseis were male. Some were the same age or older. Typically, the managers were about the same age, and the senseis were older than the group leaders. Perceptions of knowledge. Mentors had more knowledge of TPS, obviously, because they've lived TPS. They've worked for Toyota for years. Some had more technical knowledge than the Americans, but some Americans had more technical knowledge than their sensei. And Americans knew better how to work with an American workforce, and that's why they were hired, and that's why I believe Toyota used this process of mentoring. For executive coordinators, the time frame was a 3-year cycle. For coordinators and group leaders, it was a 3-month rotating cycle. So folks from the senseis from Japan would come over for 3 years for the executive coordinators, and they would switch the coordinators for the group leaders every 3 months. The characteristics of the relationship was just the 2 of us, but at times it was group-centered. It was always face-to-face. It was internal to the organization, meaning there was no external senseis. They were all internal within Toyota. There was a perceived and informal and unstructured relationship, but it was mandatory, and there was an HR developmental coordinator supporting these sensei relationships. Protection. In Japanese mentoring relationships, there's two different types of Japanese mentoring relationships. One is organizational mentoring in Japan, which traditionally has not been associated with protection of the protege. And then the apprenticeships are distinguished by protection. What I found in the Toyota organization, there was much protection that the senseis gave to their proteges. And I'll tell you some stories now. One of the stories is one of the guys was having a negative experience, and his sensei came over, removed him from that negative experience, got him a cup of coffee. They talked a little bit, and then he went back to his training. Somebody else was frustrated, and the sensei stepped in to help him, to remove him from the situation, to calm him down. There was language barriers, misunderstandings, neglect. There's a story about total preventative maintenance, which I'll tell you towards the end of this presentation. Failure is okay, and that's part of protection, is protecting. Even though failure is okay, there's times where failure is not acceptable, and the Toyota senseis understood that, and they would not let their senseis fail if it was an extremely important operation or an extremely important situation. But on smaller things, they would let them fail hard and fast, so that they can learn and apply their knowledge deeply to the next set of problems. Here's a story about Roger Lewis and his sensei, a story of protection.
I'll be over. I'll be in the plant, but I'll be over. And I didn't want to go stand there and watch. So all of a sudden, I was just going through where my desk was to pick up any notes I might have, and the executive coordinator who was a sensei in a body shop was screaming, why you stop production? Why you don't come see? Why you don't come see? And he was very excited and animated about it. He was screaming a little bit. And I just looked at him and says, I'll go with you right now. And after we left, I saw my sensei walk up behind me and get a hold of the other sensei and tell him his behavior was very bad, that he should not have exhibited that in front of the team members. So that was a bad experience. It wasn't a bad experience per se. It was a bad experience for that sensei, because he exposed his weakness of not knowing why I wanted to be there and couldn't be there because of my responsibility everywhere in the plant. At the same time, that I wanted to reconfirm that the people who were serving him, my group of inspectors, had done a good job, and to thank them.
Some lessons learned from the sensei relationships in regards to protection is the sensei must calm the protege in stressful situations, must protect the protege from emotions of other either senseis or other workers within the organization. They must prepare the protege to be successful, prepare for meetings, prepare for projects, help them prepare for conversations that the sensei knows that's coming if they bring up certain topics, so on and so forth. They have to teach that failure is okay, not only teach, but demonstrate the patience necessary when failure happens to continue to protect that person from extreme failure, but also allow them to fail so that they can learn. And then the story that I'll tell you about Russ Scafferty at the end of this in the original house of TPS is where Mr. Cho helped Russ avoid pigeonholing, and I'll get to that later in the presentation. Here's another story of protection from Jeff Maris.
And since I made some comment, I had already been coached on that comment and the response by Art. Art had his head like this because it was, another one of those 4-hour meetings. And so that guy said what he said, and Art looked up at me. That's all I did. I gave my response that he'd coached me on because he knew this was coming. And he put his head back down like this. So yeah, I think, and I've heard later on that they do get passionate only when they're amongst themselves, though. They would never show that to us because that was not what they wanted to teach us. Again, incredible discipline, incredible discipline, incredible patience that the Japanese showed with the newly American workforce.
Again, as I showed in the newspaper clipping earlier, the Japanese were anxious. As Jeff said, they did have emotion, but they tried to protect the American workforce from that emotion. This is a photo of what I refer to as a group of 26 in my book. These are the 26 original group leaders that Toyota sent to Japan to learn TPS, to learn how to build cars, and really to experience the mentoring relationship to develop these people into leaders within the Toyota production system. This is the model that I'm going to cover. Protection, which we already went through, really goes throughout initiation and the cultivation phases of the mentoring relationship. At Toyota, it starts with engineering the product and process, then learning to see and listen, perfecting the standard, problem solving and PDCA, and then challenging with respect. The sensei will question the protege along the way to check their understanding, to check their learning, to see where they're at on this continuum of the mentor-protege relationship. Engineering the product and process. Toyota has robust standards, engineer standards. They're very proactive. Problem solving does not lead to re-engineered standards at Toyota, and most companies will need to do this during transformational processes. So you may not have the engineered product and processes that Toyota has. However, it's important to understand that this is the first step into mentoring relationship for Toyota. It's a precursor. And then this step is learning to see and learning to listen. In the initial training, it was TPS over and over. Every single person that came up and talked to them, whether it was a quality manager, whether it was a manager of such and such department, they all talked about standardized work, Hajunka, Kanban, Andon, problem solving, essentially TPS. And then they would have the Americans stand in a circle or stand on the X, and the sensei would come back maybe in 2 hours and say, "What did you see?" And then listen to what the protege said that they saw, and then ask them to look deeply, to look deeper, and to observe more. And then they stand there for a couple more hours. As David Meyer said in my documentary, that some folks had to stand there for 2 days because they didn't get it. They weren't observing deeply. Here's a story from David.
The factory, he draws an X on the floor, a piece of chalk, and he says, "You looking okay?" Like, "Yeah, what am I looking for?" And he's like, "Yes, looking." I said, "No, what am I looking for?" He says, "What?" I said, "Yes, what? What am I looking for?" And he says, "Yes, looking." 10 minutes into this, I'm thinking, this is not working. And so I'm standing there, and he disappears. And he doesn't come back for 2 hours. And he says, "Hey, it's not, what's C?" Well, this guy, he's doing this and this, and then, blah, blah, blah. More looking. So I'm making notes. I'm just 2 hours, same thing. He comes back, asks me, "What's C?" And I said, "Okay." Hiking up my pants. "Well, let me show you." I'm laying it all out. I'm showing it. And he's like, "Very good, very good." I'm thinking, finally. He says, "More looking." What the hell? Right? What's it going to take? So I get back to all the other guys. They're all like, "What did you do today?" "I stood there all day looking at it like, what's that? Why are we doing that?" "I don't know." I mean, some guys had to stand for 2 days. They didn't get it, right? And the lesson comes later, right? The point of that is learn how to observe things and to observe, as Toyota says, deeply.
So again, learn to see and learn to listen. You've got to ask questions and check that your protege is seeing, listening, and learning deeply. The next step is perfecting the standard. So Toyota has robust standards. They call this my own process for the group of 26, which was 30 days in Japan for the group leaders. And during that time, they were not allowed to make improvement. They had to perfect the standard, learn the standard. So the recommendation is if you don't have standards, you've got to develop those standards and then teach the protege that process using those standards. Toyota took 30 days for the group leaders, but this may take a longer period of time if you don't have the standards already developed and my own process for the protege. Problem solving in PDCA was both operational and developmental. So they were solving real world problems, but at the same time, the senseis were checking whether or not they were deeply learning problem solving, the 5 whys, and PDCA. So what the senseis would do would take their problem sheets and crinkle them up and throw them right back at them, throw them back at the protege and say no good, indicating that they weren't thinking and communicating deeply enough. And the senseis were checking for the quality of the thinking by the questions that they were asking. Here's a story from John Allen.
You know, it's the thing where they were given a problem to solve in that year. The first 30 times they did, they wadded it up and say, "Dame this," and throw it back at them, right? Which was to deliver the message, you're not thinking deeply enough. And they keep trying and they keep thinking it's an iterative thing, only to find out that it's about the quality of the thinking. It's not about iteratively getting to something.
So problem solving in PDCA, the leader or the sensei must assess, go and see, reiterate that mistakes are okay, come to consensus, grasp and delegate the countermeasure, and make a plan and monitor. So that's what a sensei does. That's what a leader should be doing. And that's what they're trying to teach these newly formed leaders at Toyota. They're trying to teach them that they have to assess and go and see and make sure they communicate that mistakes are okay, and so on. Challenging with respect, this is giving targeted measures, teaching the protege how to make a plan, being a questioner to check whether or not they had a good plan, their thinking process behind the plan, their thinking process behind the improvement work that they did. Like Mr. Cho said, you always have to compare it to the standard to see if the team moved ahead in an improvement standpoint, behind, or they stayed the same. So you always had to compare it to the standard and then coach. Problem solving, if you didn't hit the target, either above the target or below the target, it didn't matter. If you didn't hit the target, there was problem solving. And if you did hit the target, there was probably what could you do better. Here's a story from Russ Gaffney, the general manager of Powertrain.
I was questioning, have you questioned the group leaders that they see where this waste is? What are they working on in that waste? How are they going about trying to eliminate it? He didn't come up with any solutions. He always quizzed and inquired, which was a very significant teaching and very hard to do.
And then transitioning to self-learning, this is when the protege begins to apply the lessons beyond the immediate problem. So you teach problem solving, are they using those problem solving concepts beyond the problem at hand? Transformative learning occurs and there's mutual growth between the sensei and the protege. Not everyone will succeed at this. Some will be unable to apply the lesson to the larger context, keeping them in that initiation, not quite the cultivation loop. They don't understand problem solving, and they don't respond well to challenges. So those are reasons that folks will not succeed with this as a protege. And finally, this is the original house of TPS. This was from Russ Gaffney, and the story of protection that I mentioned earlier between him and Mr. Cho. Russ wanted to implement TPM, and essentially Mr. Cho let him implement TPM after he sent him to Japan and said, "You have to tell me where TPM fits into TPS." That's why Russ came up with this drawing to show that TPM is the bedrock of TPS. Mr. Cho then didn't allow Russ to implement TPM himself. He had to delegate it to Catesby Pruitt, who implemented TPM. Catesby became known as Mr. TPM because everybody thought he was the expert of TPM, not really giving him credit for his overall understanding of TPS. And Mr. Cho was trying to protect Russ from that pigeonholing because Russ was the leader of Powertrain and he had to be the leader of TPS, not TPM or a tool within TPS, but he had to be the leader of TPS. Again, this is the model. This is the path to self-learning, protection through both initiation and cultivation phases, engineering the product or process, which Toyota already had in place prior to the mentoring relationship. Then the first step was learning to see and listen, followed by perfecting the standard, problem solving in PDCA, challenging with respect, which leads to self-learning, and the Sensei questions throughout this entire continuum to see where the protege is at on the continuum and what they need to do next to develop that protege. I am developing a course called Sensei Leadership about Toyota Senseis. And this will teach you how to become a better leader using the Sensei process. So I encourage you to check that out. This is a picture of my Sensei, Roger Lewis. Thanks for attending. And Dr. M and I will get into questions now.
Thank you very much, Doc.
Thank you.
And I'm sure I've captured it, but don't sue me for copyright, because while it was playing on my computer, because you sent this pre-recorded. So when you were talking, the computer was prompting by saying the voice was that of mine. It was talking Dr. M, talking Dr. And viewers and listeners, it was the voice that we heard in the presentations was Dr. Stevens, not mine. Okay, and I'm permitted to fail at some point, and sorry for that error. Thank you very much. One of the things that I really liked to start with is that Joe didn't want, I think, Mr. Ross to be pigeonholed as a TPM guy, because when you talk about TPM, and rarely will you ever see on LinkedIn or anyone people talking about TPM. And I like this, what he said, that TPM is the bedrock of TPS. And therefore, Joe probably sent Mr. Ross this TPM across to understand where it fits into the TPS system. So it is a part of TPS system. The base is TPM. Very few people recognize it, and they get into silo thinking, or I like what he said, pigeonholing themselves. Now, I also like that you are with healthcare, and you also are doing this leadership mentoring course. Can you speak on something more about what you do in leadership mentoring course that you're conducting that, right? You're guiding people?
Yeah, it's something that I'm working on. You know, it's going to take a while. It took me 2.5 years to get in touch with you, so I'm sure the course is going to take a while. But it's about how do we apply the lessons from, you know, the book to our own leadership styles. Most organizations aren't going to have the, I guess, the funds and the forethought to hire executive coordinators and let them be in the organization for the sole purpose of mentoring. Most organizations just don't have that flexibility. So it's really, how do we take the mentoring process and apply it to our own leadership behaviors so that we develop people that report to us and people that don't report to us using this mentor protege process.
So I'm sure that is something that all of us are looking forward to, some authentic way. And I like this presentation, especially the various phases of mentoring, but how you, the transition from one end to the other. And I like the word protection. And what you said, and when you said this, it was nostalgic memory of how my Sensei Masaki would be absolutely, is that the right word to say? Strict. I think I melted down to saying strict. He would say, no, and he would leave without an answer. So it was a nostalgic feeling for me to see. A question for you, and I think most of us would like to know that each stages of mentoring for the self-learning, there is a period of passing over to one phase to the other. How was your experience when you were doing a dissertation with your sensei, guide, supervisor, whatever is the right word that you want to use? We use in India, when I do my PhD, it's called the guide. In your case, probably you call them the supervisor, sensei, but then he was a sensei for your dissertation. How was your experience in relation to what we have talked about of self-learning? Any reflection?
Yeah, I think just about every person had what I call a light bulb moment, a time where TPS just kind of clicked with them. Some of them, it took years, probably decades is what they said, but everybody pretty much had a light bulb moment where the chip was removed from their shoulders and they could, really practice mutual trust and respect using the Toyota production system.
Yeah, what's your experience? I'm sorry, it's not personal, but then, I just wanted to know your experience working with the Toyota leaders who were there, who were exposed to such mentoring.
They're just a wealth of knowledge and experience. Every single person that I met with, I wish I would have had the time and the money to really extend this study, because I only interviewed a handful of people. And I know there's more people out there that experience Toyota Senseis and the Toyota production system at that very critical time of Toyota Georgetown. I showed a picture of my sensei, Roger Lewis, who started at Toyota Georgetown, went to General Motors, implemented a version of TPS in their Opel division, then went to Bombardier Aerospace, where he really developed the transformation curve that I talk about in my bio. The other book that I wrote is about the transformation curve, and it's Roger's approach to organizations based on what he learned at Toyota, GM, Bombardier Aerospace, and other organizations that he's helped implement versions of the Toyota production system. So I teamed up with him on that probably 10 years ago, didn't publish it until this year, just to try to take his knowledge and get it down on paper was the purpose behind that. Because, you mentioned you lost your sensei, and the senseis, it took them decades to learn what they learned. And yeah, I think it's very critical that if we have a sensei, we capture their learning. And that's why I'm glad I did the oral history approach for my dissertation. I can go back and I will do this, go back and read the transcripts again, look at what learnings I've missed. So there's a lot more interview time that I didn't publish that I have available, which is just there's just so much interesting information and knowledge from these people. It's incredible.
Yeah, I just ask you a last and final question, because I want my viewers and my listeners of my podcast to understand what it takes to be mentored, to get into the self-learning process. And it's not a silver bullet. It doesn't happen overnight. Did you get a feeling that this cultural change that happened in Georgetown, how long did it take?
It took, again, back to my sensei, he's told me a story about how he had his own personal culture, which conflicted sometimes with the Toyota culture. He came from Volkswagen, and the automobile industry at the time was, the American automobile industry at the time, from my understanding, was a lot of yelling and screaming and not a whole lot of cooperation and problem solving the way Toyota was cooperating with each other. So my sensei tells a story about how he used to have a sticky note he would put on his planner that said Toyota's culture. And then when he got in his car, he would switch it and put a sticky note that said Roger's culture on there. And one day, I don't know how long it was, he started asking other people, because other people were doing the same thing that came from other automobile industries. And one day they just stopped doing it and they didn't realize it. And I'm not sure how long it took. I know it took Numi about a year to really transform. I'm not sure. I'm sure it took and I don't know that everybody transformed, but it took some time to really transform from the old automobile culture to Toyota's culture. It took these guys at the top some time.
I'm sorry for that. I had Rico Kano, who came along with this Ninjutsu group and with Sensei Iwata. And I have her on record saying that Iwata saying that, we teach TPS, but then you have to adopt according to your culture and your people in your organization. So it is, I mean, I want it from you that it is not that you copy you copy a culture or you evolve a culture. Since you have done your PhD in that, what's your take on that?
So it's not about copying a culture, because if you try to copy Toyota's culture, you're going to get extremely frustrated because, again, if you read my book and understand the foresight and the thinking behind, they didn't even change the line so that they could focus on mentoring and developing people. They had planned this so far in advance, the way they learned to work with an American workforce at NUMMI and then hired an American workforce at Georgetown. So their forward thinking is just unbelievable compared to most organizations. So you'll get frustrated if you just try to copy Toyota's culture. But I think if you start small, just recognizing problems on a daily basis and solving those problems and start to funnel them up and figure out what are the top problems and how do they relate to our metrics for our organization, start to get alignment, cascade those behaviors. And eventually, after you do that and keep practicing, you can start to implement different Toyota tools like Kanban and Andon and standardized work. But without that culture in place, you try to implement the tools and the tools just don't stick. So having a culture of mutual trust and respect and problems are blessings, just like the mindset that I went through at the beginning of the presentation, the mindset necessary for the mentoring process.
Thanks, Doc. As a matter of fact, it just reminded me that I published today my interaction with Haidobe, the son of Hajime Obe. Obe-san was telling me when we asked him the question about culture in his presentation, he said that in TPS, the manager said, we don't get stuck, I'm paraphrasing him, we don't get stuck in this cultural thing. It is my responsibility to have the culture and my responsibility to teach my junior to change or to make the culture change in the culture. So he took on the responsibility. The manager himself took on the responsibility to change the culture and not getting into, I like this word, pigeonhole by saying that because of culture, we cannot implement any of the continuous improvement processes.
Mm-hmm.
So it just resonated that. And Obe-san did say that with Toyota was successful in all these organizations, and many Japanese organizations were not successful in, moving across similar culture.
Mm-hmm.
So the final word for my viewers.
Continue to live mutual trust and respect. Be patient. My sensei taught me the 3 G's: go see, get the facts, and grasp the situation, and the 3 P's: people, passion, and patience, to balance those two throughout your implementation. And I just stress patience, because not every organization is going to be able to start where Georgetown started. So the patience needed is incredible, because it takes time to change a culture and to turn a moving ship into a different direction.
And patience I have, Dr. Steven. You know why I'm saying this? Is because I have a new platform which is called the Dr. M's Launch. So you will be invited over there, and you will have guests over there who will come on invitation, and they would have gone through this presentation which you have made, and you will have a lot of series of questions from them. So please say yes and accept my invitation. Straight away, I'm recording it, that please accept my invitation, and whenever during the course of the year, of couple of months ahead, be there for me in the lounge, and we will take this forward along with the other people who are listening to this. I have a lot of series of questions to you, and I'm sure we will all be that much more adaptable and that much more have patience for such long duration effect that we are going to have in transformation. You don't expect a caterpillar to become a butterfly without going through a cocoon phase, and the cocoon phase is quite dark and gloomy and what have you. But then when you can see success like in Georgetown, I'm sure many of us are interested to follow the process. So thank you very much, and I'm going to stop recording, and you please do come to my launch. You're invited. Say yes, Doc. You'll be there.
I'll be there.